for YouTube as well, because trying to get as much exposure. No, okay, I guess I'm okay. I'll tell you, modern technology is a wonderful thing.
Yes, the millennial age.
Yeah, so you sound like you're a millennial. Are you a millennial?
Yes, I'm a 20-something-year-old.
Uh-huh. Hey, have you tried?
In the sense of being robbed of a livelihood through this terrible, horrible generation we live in. But what?
Have you tried to sign up for Obamacare?
I have not, actually.
Why not?
It's like you, because I already have a good insurance.
What, through your folks or work?
Yeah, through work.
Through work. Have they talked to you lately about a change in your plan?
Actually, no, not me personally, but a lot of my friends have been telling me how their bosses are like, or whoever's, the head of, like, if I have friends working in the office or whatever.
Right.
They're cutting in their hours because now, like, one of the requirements of Obamacare is that if you have an employee for working a certain amount of hours, that's when you have to provide things like insurance and stuff.
Right.
So what the companies now are doing is it's creating a way around that through lessening employees' hours, firing people that have worked there for a certain amount of time because, of the bureaucratic stuff that's behind Obamacare. They're finding a way to go around it, and they're taking it out on, us, pretty much.
Yeah, well, if you cut a person down, as I understand it, to 30 hours, then you don't have to offer them a full insurance package. But you know what? You know what else is in there is what they do is then they add up all the amount of hours that people are working, and then you divide that by 40. So the employer is still going to have to pay. You know what I'm saying?
In the end, they're still going to have to pay for the.
Yeah. So what they do is, so you got these 3 guys working 30 hours. That's 90 hours, right? And you divide that by 40, well, you got at least 2-time workers. And that's how Obamacare is going to get around that, trying to cheat the system to 30. I mean, it does kind of help the employer a little bit, but, these guys are...
I don't think that's the big thing that I disagree with in this whole thing that's going on. It should never have been about helping the employer. It should be about, the employee, the receiver of the Medicare. We shouldn't be rearranging our whole system, as the benefit of this, this aristocracy of big business. It should be the opposite way. Because, look what happened. You have the marketing bubble. You have the .com bubble. You have this new energy bubble. It's all it all correlates with that in this ineffectual, these ineffectual systems that they're trying to prolong and keep. Who passed? It's because the same people are still in office. Hillary Clinton, she's the one who passed the deregulation bills during her husband's presidency that created the housing bubble. And this whole Obamacare fiasco is going to, in itself, be just a whole disaster in the sense of economics. Because you're going to have these microcosms of bureaucracies interacting with the big bureaucracy of Obamacare. Like specific businesses will have, individual, requirements and prerequisites for Obamacare, et cetera, and you have demographics involved, and it's just going to create this overly complicated just mess.
It already is a complicated mess. Obamacare created 150 brand new government agencies. And some people say that it's designed to fail so that the only alternative would be a single payer plan. Now, that's diabolical to say the least, but it seems reasonable.
Why do you say that? Diabolical.
Why?
Yeah.
Why would I say that's diabolical? Well, I'm against a single payer plan. In the original Obamacare bill in that originated in the House of Representatives in 2010 was single payer. And then it got sent over to the Senate, and remember, Ted Kennedy died, and they didn't have enough votes to end debate, so they came up with what we call today as Obamacare. But one thing you alluded to, and that is what the American people don't know is who was in the closed-door sessions that put together what we call today as Obamacare. We happen to know that one of the corporations was United Healthcare. And you mentioned about large corporations being involved. United Healthcare stands to make trillions of dollars over the next 10, 20 years.
Oh my God.
And they were...
I guarantee you... I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, just think. I mean, that's why the Obama administration wanted to get a hold of healthcare, because it's 1/6 of the economy, and it's billions and billions and trillions of dollars. It's a hell of a lot of money, and if you can unionize that whole workforce, then you can guarantee that the Democrats and the progressive socialists are going to run this country for the next, at least 20, 30 years. I mean that everybody got something in that closed door hearing. Everybody. I mean, the unions were exempted from the Cadillac tax that's supposed to fund Obamacare. The big business got exempted for a year, and people are gonna be in a situation where there's going to be at least 3 different tiers of health care. You're going to have the health care for the wealthy and the government employees, and then you're going to have the people that are on Medicaid and Medicare, and then you're going to have the rest of the people. And the rest of the people are people like you who hopefully are going to pay your premiums and not get sick. But like you said, the numbers aren't going to work. I mean, they only have 1 million people signed up right now. And that's not even close to their goal. And by every account, the website hasn't worked and isn't working and has huge security gaps in it, and for somebody of your generation, you've probably heard enough already. You're not going to go anywhere near it, but you have to. You don't have a choice. I mean, eventually you're going to have to go to the exchanges. And I mean, I imagine unless you've got I guess you have private insurance, so you're going to probably be okay. But from what you're saying, your friends are already having a bunch of problems. Right?
Good news all comes from them trying to monopolize healthcare, create this monopoly.
Well, the thing is,
That's what it essentially is.
The government isn't very good, or the government has been a complete failure at Medicaid and Medicare. Why would you give them even more responsibility in the healthcare interest? That's what always kind of amazed me. All right, hey caller, do you mind if I cut you loose? I want to move on to some others.
Not at all.
Is that okay?
Of course. Yeah, of course. Great talk, man. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, man, it's my honor. Thank you very much. Go Bears!
Go Bears!
All right, everybody, that was nice. Nice to have a caller, really good caller. Nice to get a millennial, someone who knows what's going on with the young people, and I probably should have thought of some better questions to ask him. You know what I forgot to ask him is, obviously, he doesn't have doesn't have much faith in the president, but I should have asked him about this poll that came out, and I'm looking for it. Maybe we'll go to this. But that was a good caller. Man, that's exciting. Boy, it's a lot easier when you have someone else who's calling in instead of having a monologue the whole thing. Let's see. I don't want to do that story. I guess I'm going to do this story. I'm reluctant to do this story because I'm not a big fan of Senator Rand Paul, because I think maybe, I know he's a libertarian. The problem I have with libertarians, I believe in their cause, I believe in their principles, I believe in their ideology, The only problem I have with libertarians like Senator Ron Paul is that sometimes they're unrelenting. And there's a fine line between being unrelenting and understanding that you're not going to be able to further your cause. A lot of times these libertarians are real mavericks, and they want to make this huge or make huge changes in the system, and it's not going to happen. You have to think about incremental victories, and at least that's more my style. And a lot of times these guys are just a flash in the pan because they get on the stage and they make a bunch of speeches and they don't get these big changes they want, and then they vent their anger, and the cause, not only is it not forwarded, it's actually even a little bit retarded. It's even a little bit held back. So it's hard for these firebrands sometimes to realize that you got to keep your cool, you got to keep your powder dry, and be satisfied with incremental successes. This story comes from the Capitalist Institute, and it's about Ron Paul, and it says, let's see, we now know Obama lied about the NSA stealing innocent American citizens' phone records, Facebook passwords, and contact lists. They secretly sift through our search history and our emails with a blatant disregard for the Fourth Amendment. It is not about fighting terror. It is about control. And Rand Paul plans to take them to the Supreme Court over it. This isn't the first time Rand has taken action to hold the NSA accountable either. Earlier this year, he launched a class action lawsuit against the federal government over the NSA's activities. See, I didn't know anything about this, that there had been a class action suit filed against the federal government. Remember, we keep talking about why isn't Congress or someone from the Republican Party trying to get this administration, and in particular the Democratic Party, in court for violating statute. Anyways, this article goes on to say, and this is Rand Paul's argument why he is involved in this class action suit to take the federal government to court over the NSA and most likely the Fourth Amendment. It says, the argument for the seizure of private records by the federal government is that they are just mining metadata. False. And that we don't really own our records anyway, the phone company does. Rand disagrees. And that's the point you have to understand. And that's the nuance that the administration and the Justice Department is using. And they're saying that what the NSA is doing isn't illegal because they don't actually hold these electronic messages. It's the provider, the phone company, Google, Microsoft. And it's a difference without a distinction. That's the argument Rand's making too. He's saying that these are what the Founding Fathers intended us to consider as our personal effects within the confines of the purview of our home, our reality. And that's how this whole argument, or where this whole argument is going to hinge. And Rand disagrees. Newsmax reports this line of reasoning. Rand says, I would like to apply the Fourth Amendment to third-party records. I don't think you give up your right to privacy when someone holds your records. So when I have a contract with a phone company, I think those are still my records, and you can look at them if you're from the government and you ask a judge. So this is a real tight sort of a approach, and it'll be interesting to see if that's the case. I mean, the whole idea of the third party, it makes it sort of like a three-legged stool. And it goes on to say the Fourth Amendment gives a judge the authority to grant a warrant for individual phone records on a case-by-case basis. It does not allow the government to spy on millions of innocent Americans through some sort of countrywide blanketed warrant. It just doesn't work that way, despite what the power-hungry administration wants to believe, he continues. It's absolutely against the spirit and the letter of the Fourth Amendment to say that a judge can write one warrant and you can get every phone call in America, and that's what's happening. He says, I think it's wrong. It goes against everything American stands for, and I will help fight that all the way to the Supreme Court. And the author says that Senator Rand Paul is right. The government having the authority to secretly spy on its citizens is exactly the kind of tyranny our forefathers wanted to escape. I am reminded of William Pitt's chilling quote. Now, this is from the 1700s. No, 1800s. 1700s. And he says, the poorest man may in his cottage bid defiance to all the force of the crown. It may be frail, its roof may shake, the wind may blow through it, the storms may enter, the rain may enter, but the King of England cannot enter. And that's kind of a romantic nuance of our rights of person and possessions. Let's see, well over 200 years have passed since Pitt spoke these words, but the sentiment is just as valid as ever. We must do everything we can to fight this country's descent into despotism, and you can help by spreading the word about Rand's plan to take the NSA to the Supreme Court. And what's interesting here, if we get around to these polling numbers, it just came out from Pew and was it CBS or, you know, credible polling agency. They polled a bunch of people, scientific poll. But what I'm trying to say is that President Obama is losing the millennial demographic, and the president's losing them, and the Democratic Party's losing the millennials, and it's because of this issue. This is sort of the issue for the millennials. This privacy thing on the internet is a big issue. It's like women of my age and abortion. I hate to use that example, but from what I understand, the millennials do not like people looking at their electronically generated communications in a big way, and they've showed it in this polling. And now a majority of millennials don't trust Obama. I mean, it's pretty close. Maybe we have time to get to that, but before this NSA stuff started coming up, President Obama had the millennials by a large margin, and now the millennials are a majority against the president. So that's a big sea change. And again, that's why the Democrats are going to be so worried. President Obama doesn't care about his poll numbers, because President Obama kind of looks at it like, not my problem, and President Obama is too smart to worry and too cute to care about the poll numbers. But you can bet your bottom dollar, my fellow lovers of liberty, that the Democrats that are going to be running for re-election in November 2014 are looking at the president's poll numbers with the millennials and other groups, and they're worried. They're really worried for the prospects in the 2014 election cycle. All right, hold on. I'm the trailer park prophet. All right, here's a little quote from Ayn Rand. Capitalism is a social system based on the recognition of individual rights, including property rights, in which all property is privately owned, not owned by the government, like in communism and some socialism. Oh, this is a good story. We got to do this story. Love this story. I read this story a few hours ago. I'm trying to remember where this actually happened. I got this story from The Last Resistance. Yeah, I've never been here before, but it looks like a pretty nice web page. And this article is written by Philip Hodges on December 7th. And I'll just read this to you because you need to hear this. This is where our one-size-fits-all big box government union-run education system is headed in this country. Now, this story is from Pennsylvania. A Pennsylvania fifth grader named Johnny Jones was suspended for shooting an imaginary bow and arrow at a fellow classmate who initiated the fight by shooting Jones with his folder. The fifth grader had faced expulsion but was instead given a one-day suspension. This will remain on his permanent record until the Rutherford Institute, whom Jones's parents retained to represent their son, can convince the school officials to remove it. In a letter to school superintendent Douglas McCusick with the Rutherford Institute summarized the incident. As we understand the facts of Johnny's case, during the week of October 14th, Johnny asked his teacher for a pencil during class. He walked to the front of the classroom to retrieve the pencil, and during his walk back to his seat, a classmate and friend of Johnny's held his folder like an imaginary gun and shot at Johnny. Johnny playfully used his hands to draw the bowstrings on a completely imaginary bow and shot an arrow back at his friend. The two children laughed. Seeing this, another girl in the class reported to the teacher that the boys were shooting at each other. The teacher took both Johnny and the other boy into the hall and lectured them about the disruption. This is exactly where this should have ended, right? A little talk, powwow with the teacher outside the class. Well, not the case. Instead, however, the teacher sent an email to Johnny's mother, Beverly Jones, alerting her to the seriousness of the violation because the children were using firearms in their horseplay. Noting that Johnny was issued a referral to the principal, Principal John Horton contacted Mrs. Jones soon thereafter and asserted that Johnny's behavior was a serious offense that could result in expulsion. Although Mr. Horton offered to merely require that Johnny serve a one-day in-office suspension. Now, the Trailer Park Prophet knows a lot about office suspension. In fact, as I probably told you, I've gone to 11 or 12 different elementary schools, and as the new kid, I'd get hassled all the time and I'd get in a fight, and the next thing you know, I would be getting my butt warmed up in the vice president's office, and a lot of times I'd wind up having to serve in-office suspension. And it was a really learning experience for me to be spending what I had to do was like weeks sometimes in the principal's office, but it gave me an opportunity to watch adults interact and how an office works and the office equipment and everything. But I can relate to what's going on here with little Johnny. At any rate, when Miss Jones asked Mr. Horton what policy Johnny had violated, Mr. Horton replied that Johnny had made a threat to another student using a replica or representation of a firearm through his use of an imaginary bow and arrow. In no way was Johnny's bow and arrow a violation of the school's policy to prohibit replicas of weapons because it didn't exist. It was imaginary, immaterial. It was all in his head. But it doesn't matter. What Johnny was really guilty of was committing a thought crime. A thought crime. Schools are systematically trying to purge students, especially boys, minds of the idea of defense weapons. Don't even think about guns or even bows and arrows. It's all part of their brainwashing campaign to make children scared to death of guns and believe that guns and other weapons are inherently evil. If they believe they are evil from the time of their youth, then when they grow up, they won't even want to have any kind of weapon, and there won't be much of a need for gun confiscation if not many people have guns. But at any rate, it's it. I just, what gets me is that the teacher and the principal, these are people who are educated. They're in the care of children, and they possess this type of hyperbolic reaction to basic kids play. That's what I find amazing, that these individuals in this school will go out of their way to make a case over something that is just children being children. What the principal and the teacher should say in this Pennsylvania school is, listen, don't act like children when you're in school here. We can't tolerate any kind of suggestive, implied violent behavior because we're against violence. As if you could ever purge violence from human society. But it's just an example of how entitled and secure these individuals are in their beliefs. And I would like to interview these people. I'd like to get into their life a little more. I wonder what type of parents they are and how is their relationship structured with their significant other, and really just sit down and ask them their value system. Like you would imagine that this principal and this teacher are progressive socialists. I think that's probably a given, and they're anti-gun, and they're very much in support of Common Core, the federalization of all the school's curriculum. And I imagine they voted for President Obama, and they feel like they're doing everything they can to help President Obama in his march to turn this country into a lockstep socialist regime. A lot said there. All right, let's make sure we don't have another caller. No caller. God, that's so exciting. I'm so glad we got a caller to the Trailer Park Prophet Show. By the way, better do a little station ID. My name's Daniel Gray. I am the Trailer Park Prophet. This is Hump Day with the Prophet, and I'm really grateful you're all here today. We're getting more and more viewers and more listeners all the time. People are calling in. The show's getting more hits. I'm happy. I couldn't be happier. It's a real honor to be in the business of being a citizen journalist. I mean, it's really fun to look forward to. You think about your show all the time, and you think about what stories you want to do, and then you get on the air and you do as much as you can, and you realize you left something out in one of your soliloquies, but you sit down and you do the best job you can. You try to read as much as you can beforehand, and it's just a lot of fun. You try to keep as many of the bad words out, like and and I mean, I try and do that. You got to almost be in several frames of mind. You got to be thinking about the information, and you got to think about how you present it without using all those filler words like and and it's a challenge, but a lot of people I think can do what I'm doing here, and really it doesn't matter how good you are at it. And that's why I encourage so many people out there to go ahead and start a program in your own community about the trailer park, like the Trailer Park Prophet. It doesn't have to be the Trailer Park Prophet, of course, but if you're on Facebook and you're part of your town and you're going to meetings, or you see what's going on, or you listen to people in the community, you can become a citizen journalist too. You can get on Blog Talk Radio. I would recommend them, and you'd be able to have your own show and have people on, and it's a joy. It is truly a joy, and I know there's a lot of people out there that have the skills to be a talk show host, and I encourage them, and you should encourage them too. We can never have too many citizen journalists. That's what I think. All right, this next story, I got this from one of my black conservative friends from the Curtis Report, and he posted this story, and he said, okay, guys and girls, they really are here. It's just isn't rumor anymore. This recently received from a friend right in western Colorado on October 26, 2013 via Facebook mobile on my phone. So anyways, this guy, and this was in Grand Junction, this guy, I'll just tell you the story real quick so I don't have to read this to you. And basically, it's a picture of this Homeland Security police officer, and he's in a ATV, and it's all marked up police, Homeland Security, and it says right on the door above police, it says Federal Police Force. No, it says the Federal Protective Service of the United States Secret Service, Uniform Division. And it's in a parking lot in Grand Junction, and I've actually seen these cars out there. They're white Chevy Blazers, and the police is on the door, and then on the front clip is Homeland Security, and then they have a blue stripe, blue stripe on the passenger door. And this guy, he went and took a picture of this vehicle, and the driver stopped, and he asked this guy who took this picture, he says, do you have a problem? And this guy responds, to which I replied, just taking a picture. Is that legal now? He then asked, he then eked forward a few feet and then stayed there in the middle of the road for about a minute and a half until a car approached him from behind, forcing him to move. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the Federal Police Force, or the Federal Protective Service of the United States Secret Service Uniform Division, as they are also known. We have been hearing about an actual recipients of all the billions, yes, billions of rounds of ammunition that have been produced for and procured by the Social Security Administration, the IRS, and other various governmental agencies. For what purpose? They are here, right in downtown Grand Junction. What is the real purpose of the Federal Protective Service, and why do we need them? And that's really the big question here. But I've brought this to the show several times. President Obama said on one occasion that we need a civil police force, a civil army in the United States. And that's, in essence, what this is. This is a civil army at the command of the President of the United States. And that's got a lot of people worried. And the Founding Fathers were very much worried about something like this too, having a federal police force. Because the deal is that states are sovereign political entities. The federal government just can't come in and do whatever they want. And this is a way that the Obama administration is sort of skirting the rules to provide for a situation where there's a national police force. He's using Homeland Security, and they're using that, excuse the pun, as a vehicle to create a national police force. That's the point that Barry Curtis is trying to make here. And while I said that, here, let's go into this. Talking about states' rights. This is a important article, and I want to get into this because we found out that South Carolina has decided that they can withdraw themselves from Obamacare. And they're eyeing a class action suit. Or no, they're not going to. Actually, it doesn't involve the courts. What they're doing in South Carolina is they're actually running a bill that would exempt South Carolina from Obamacare. And the way they're doing it is kind of interesting, and I wanted to get into that if I can ever find the article, because if it does work, and by all accounts, everyone who has actually looked at the South Carolina concept feels that it would work. Let's see here. Biomechanical exchange limits. That's not it. Alright, let's see. Maybe I can't find this article. But yeah, I think you get the gist of it. The important thing to remember is South Carolina, their legislature is looking to pass a piece of legislation that would exempt South Carolina from Obamacare. And the way they're doing it is they're not going to provide, South Carolina, the state, is not going to provide any state employees to actually implement Obamacare or implement one of the exchanges. And also in the bill, it says that any fines that South Carolina voters would entail for not being in Obamacare, and whatever fines Obamacare would hit businesses for not having Obamacare insurance, would be paid for by the state, which is really kind of an interesting way to go about getting yourself out from Obamacare. But basically, what this legislation says is in Obamacare, and it's already passed the South Carolina House of Representatives, and now is sitting in the Senate for approval, and it is a Republican majority in the Senate in South Carolina. They're real serious, and they really feel like they've found a loophole, and that they'll be able to get around having to provide or have their citizens. Okay, here we go. All right. And hopefully this is the article I want to look at, because it's kind of interesting, as far as the thought process. That's always kind of the cool thing when you're looking at these kind of initiatives is, okay, what's the constitutional law? Where is your standing? How are you aggrieved? But this is legislation, and it says, and this comes from the Capitalism Institute. Just the other day, we reported that doctors and hospitals are rejecting Obamacare across the country, and it seems that states are following suit, or beginning to follow suit. South Carolina is posed to pass a bill that bans Obamacare in their state. The bill's original sponsor was State Senator Tom Davis. Says the proposed legislation renders the Affordable Care Act void or inoperable through a handful of provisions, all of which are legal, effective, and within the state's power to do. The core of South Carolina's Freedom of Healthcare Protection Act, it's kind of a funny name, House Bill 3101, outlaws any state employees, officers, or agencies from implementing Obamacare. The federal government can try to subject South Carolinians to the horrors of the ACA Act, but they would have no personnel or funds in the state to actually carry it out. Obamacare would be nothing more than a ghost. All right, just keep your mind open for a little bit. Davis says the component stems from the Supreme Court case Prince versus United States. What the Supreme Court said is that states are not merely political subdivisions of the federal government to carry out what the federal government does. They, meaning states, are sovereign entities. Congress can pass laws, but it cannot compel the states to utilize either their treasury or personnel to implement those federal laws. See how the nuance there? The state Senate vote on the bill will take place in January. It was already, like I mentioned, soared through the House on a 65-34 vote last April. Right-wing news reports the bill now heads to the GOP-controlled. I already told you that. And the bill would also outlaw the creation of any state exchanges, as well as prohibiting tax deductions to offset the penalties from the federal government for not participating. I mentioned that. It is essential that there is plenty of reason to believe it could very well be a model for other states to follow. A little quote here says, I think it's a mistake to try to make what was traditionally been a state issue into a national issue. Obama said in regards to gay marriage last year, however, I expect he will conveniently abandon his shaky support of states' rights in an effort to combat this. It is his legacy after all. So we'll have to see if this goes anywhere. It's an interesting approach. It's not going to cost a lot, and it doesn't take a lot of lobbyists, and it might work. But I got a feeling Obama and his team members are already figuring out a way to hold this up in court. They're not going to allow this to happen in South Carolina. I don't really see this happening. I think this is kind of a fool's dream, but we'll see, right? We'll see. Obviously, stranger things have happened. Okay, let's get into these polls. I keep talking about these polls. And we need to talk about them because they're still making a downward fall as we speak, talking about the Obama numbers. Now I got these numbers, they're all over the place, but I got these from the Best of Kane. Kane is one of my favorite politicians out there. And they're talking about the Quinnipiac MSNBC Obama polling at new lows, and they did a generic poll on who would you vote for if the election were today, Republicans or Democrats, and the people voted for a majority of Republicans. And that was a switch from the last time they did this poll back in October. But it says women, independents, and young people turn their backs on Obama. The news keeps getting worse for the president as well as Democrats in general. The new Quinnipiac polling data shows Obama at an all-time low with just 38% approval of his job performance and 57% disapproval. That's horrible. Those are numbers like President Bush had. And remember, those numbers are bad, and that's even with the lamestream media trying to soften the blow of all of these various debacles that are taking place in the Obama administration. If President Bush had had as many debacles as President Obama has with Obamacare and the NSA spying and the IRS and all that, his numbers, President Obama's numbers, would probably be a approval rating of like 14. Don't forget that. Don't forget the power of the press to either pump a guy up or deflate a guy or girl. All right, we know what we're thinking. How can 38% actually approve of this mess? Your guess is as good as ours, but it's worth noting that President's Quinnipiac numbers are now below George W. Bush's at the same time in his administration. And that 38% approval is actually the good news for the Democrats. The bad news is the president is underwater with women. 44% approve to 49% disapprove. And young people that I mentioned before, 41% approve, 49% disapprove. And independents disapproval number is a staggering 62% disapprove to 30% approve. 62%. And Democrats know they got to get these independents, that they're important. And a lot of people say they're the swing demographic, and although there's other people who disagree with that, I don't know. Anyways, the numbers for Obama's job approval are headed down. His dismal job performance has also begun hurting his party as a whole. Voters now say they'd like Republicans in control of both the House and the Senate by a substantial 47% to 42%. And that's not substantial, but still, that's a huge swing. What, pray tell, could be causing all of this? Obviously, it's Barack Obama's signature legislation, or as Herman Cain says, his signature debacle or his signature disaster. At the risk of offending Melissa Perry Harris, we're going to take President's advice, pre-launch advice, and call it Obamacare. After all, he used to be proud of that term. We'll hate to stop using it. Oh, in case you missed Monday's show, this Melissa Perry Harris said that the word Obamacare was racist, that it was thought up by a bunch of Republican millionaires. Even though Obama said one time he was proud, he was proud to be referred to having his signature healthcare plan referred to as Obamacare. All right, this morning on Fine Folks, or the Fine Folks on MSNBC, were forced to echo Quinnipiac's findings about slightly higher NBC numbers, and they admit that it's all thanks to the incredibly unpopular healthcare. Let's listen in on this. This is NBC on MSNBC, and let's see. And these numbers are horrible. Like it shows a poll here on the MSNBC board, and it says most important issue in shaping view of president. 58% said healthcare, 25% economics, 23% government shutdown, 16% said Syria and Iran. And remember, this is all from November. And let's go ahead and listen to this broadcast. Let's see if they have anything interesting that we can be edified by for our edification. All right, come on, MSNBC. This is the Trailer Park Profit Show. My name's Daniel Gray, and we are waiting on you, bro. Come on and talk to us. All right, this obviously isn't going to work. It might pop in. It's just an interesting piece. Let's see. If there's anything else in this article that I want to share with you. Oh, here we go. Here's this info babe. Come on, info babe. I don't know. Maybe my speakers aren't on. Something's not going on. All right, this just isn't going to work. You know, sometimes the technology trips me up. Okay, she might.
Not walk away
Here we
from
go.
this focus group without realizing the president is losing the faith of these swing voters, many of whom he won to his side both in 2008 and in 2012. 8 of the 11 participants, these were independents or independent leaners, voted for the president in 2012. Not one of them described themselves as proud or satisfied with him. Instead, they used words like or disappointed.
I was really excited going into his first term. His first term was certainly a disappointment.
He said a lot of things, but he's really just turned out to be just another politician, another president.
I think, like all politicians, we talk the talk, but it's hard to walk the walk.
He's a big disappointment.
Explain to me, big disappointment.
He's not focused on creating more jobs, just fixing the economy, getting things going again, making people more prosperous, It's like the economy's just sitting still.
There was no sense of strength that came out of this. It was a sense of somebody that was being buffeted around in the wind, a person who was facing all those difficulties, and instead of marshaling himself for the times were controlling him.
Again, realize this criticism is coming from former supporters of the president. This wasn't a piling on from adversaries. When asked to describe the president, participants used words like inexperienced, powerless, cautious, timid, and overwhelmed. Congress reported.
Overwhelmed. Yeah, well, that's not good.
President Obama famously promised, if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor.
Oh, we talked about this on Monday. We don't want to hear that again. All right, you're listening to Daniel Gray. I am the Trailer Park Prophet, broadcasting live on Blog Talk Radio from beautiful Crestone, Colorado. Welcome. I appreciate y'all being here. That just warms the cackles of my little heart. All right, so we did the polling, did the South Carolina story. Oh, let's do this. I want to do this. We have another offering from the Doctor of Common Sense, one of my heroes, who happens to be a conservative black man. And he's going to weigh in on the Michelle Obama mad at Barack during the funeral for Mandela. And I'll tell you, I love this guy. He calls himself the Doctor of Common Sense. He's a Republican. Well, no, I don't know if he's a Republican. I know he's conservative, and I know he's black, and I like the way he thinks. So let's give this a listen. Listen. Again, welcome back to the program, Mr. Doctor of Common Sense. I don't know if this... What is this? Here we go.
Michelle was not happy. Did you see Michelle at the funeral? I mean, the diva was upset about Mr. Big Stuff. Like, who do you think you are, Barack? Yeah, Barack Obama ain't never got her love in the first place. I'm your host, the Doctor of Common Sense, E.T. Williams. Please visit the website at www.whateverhappenedtocommonsense.com. Did you see the looks Michelle Obama was giving Barack Obama at the memorial service of Nelson Mandela? Michelle didn't seem like she was having any part of this festivities. She was she was making some faces. It looked like you would have wrote under her name in the yearbook, does not play well with others. Michelle, I said, girl, did you swallow a lemon or something? She was sitting there like, what? And Barack Obama, Mr. Big Stuff himself, had the unmitigated gall to be taking pictures with Prime Minister David Cameron and of Denmark and Prime Minister Helene Thornton-Schmidt. Michelle said, who is this heifer all over my man? Who is this other man? She probably was a little bit more scared that David may be getting a piece of Barack than she was of Helene getting a piece of Barack, because the diva Michelle was upset. She was giving some dirty looks. I said, well, this heifer is upset about some things. She didn't care about the camera or nothing. Michelle was going straight hood. You remember this before Michelle got all that, her skin bleached, before she got her nice perm on her hair, when her hair was still kinky. You know, when she looked like something from a Tarzan movie, back before she became the diva that she is, before Michelle got her process going. Yeah, Michelle was giving him one of those damn looks like, Negro, please, what are you doing? Skinning and grinning. You shuffling Negro, you. Michelle was upset. I didn't understand why Michelle was giving these type of frowns. He was talking to dignitaries. Michelle said, I don't give a damn who they are. Think I am, fool? I'm the first lady. I'm the diva. I got a staff. Where's my staff at anyway? Can I get something cooked over here? Some hors d'oeuvres or something? Michelle was not having any part of the festivity. You think she didn't tell Barack Obama something when they got back to the back or when they got back in Air Force One? She said, I don't give a damn if I am riding with the Bushes. I don't like them anyway. I can't stand there and help a Lara. Anyway, Michelle was giving attitude. Now, you know she's going to give Barack an earful. She probably going to put the strap on Barack now. When they get back to the room, like, fool, you going to embarrass me like that on national TV, fool? All that skin and grin smile, taking pictures? Think this is a yearbook? You ain't in high school, fool. I don't mind you buying and kissing up to the Castros over there for Cuba, and you kissing the behind of Nelson Mandela and everybody else, but damn it, you're not going to embarrass me taking pictures of you up there skinning and grinning with this white woman right here in my face, Barack. You done lost your damn mind or something, boy? Put the strap on, Michelle. Get the strap on for this fool. She said, I didn't tolerate this Reggie Love thing. I didn't tolerate all this other homosexualities. I know you're a sissy. Yeah, I've been knew you was a sister. I can whoop you anyway, fool. I think Michelle probably can take Barack. But she was highly upset. She said, who do you think you are, Mr. Big Stuff? Disrespecting me. Well, Michelle, I'm telling you, boy, she'll go straight hood on you. Thought she was going to punch her for a minute. She looked at him like, she looked around like, what the hell is going on, fool? You taking pictures? Again? Enough of that. Well, Michelle was not happy, I'm telling you. I said, dang, Michelle, boy, Barack, you better get ready to get whooped when you back to the Air Force One, fool.
Oh, I know I'm making a big deal of this story, but it's a classic. It truly is a classic. You get some insight into the Obama's personal relationship. It's like, oh my God, I mean, we're almost like peeping Toms looking at the relationship of Michelle and Barack Obama. We actually are the flies on the wall watching this couple and how they function together. It's a big moment. It's fantastic. It's better than reality TV. It's better than a lot of other entertainment out there because these are our president and first lady. And we're inside these people's head. We're watching what goes on in the dynamics of their relationship. I'm just enamored with this story. It's so incredibly interesting. And I'm sure some of you are out there saying, oh, prophet, you're a gossip and you're a voyeur, and maybe that's right. I don't know. That's a fair assessment, but I can't help it. It's interesting. All right, I guess we got to go to this story. This story kind of worries me. And there was a intelligence briefing meeting last weekend before Congress. And we're finding out now some of what was discussed in that meeting. I got this story from BizPac Review. And it says, despite White House claims to the contrary, House Homeland Security Chairman Michael McCall, he's a Republican from Texas, says Al-Qaeda is spreading like wildfire and the threat of an attack is growing. I imagine he's talking about inside the United States. He says, the president has this narrative that I believe is a false narrative that gives a false sense of security that since the killing of bin Laden, everything is fine. Al-Qaeda is on the run, and this war on terror is over. McCall told Bill Hemmer on Fox News, America's Newsroom Monday, quite the contrary. I would say it's not a pre-9/11 threat, as he indicates, but rather a threat that spreads like wildfire. Hemmer asked if President Obama was right when he said the leaders of Al-Qaeda have been decimated. Most of the leadership who had been killed were active around 9/11, and McCall said that he thought programs and policies in place now would prevent an event like that from happening again. Quote, but the smaller scale attacks, like we saw in Boston earlier this year, we are not protected from. They are much more difficult to detect, deter, and disrupt. He said, quote, so when he says we've taken out core Al-Qaeda, he's talking about a very, very small fraction of the radical extremists. The threat is growing to America's national security, and McCall says he thinks the people need to know about the real threat level, which this segment here on Fox News actually does, and you can go to my webpage and check it out. But at any rate, remember, we reported months and months and months ago that Al-Qaeda, they have a website. It's called, oh my God, what is Al-Qaeda's website? I'm sure you can find it by just saying Al-Qaeda's website. Oh, it's called Inspire. I think it's called Inspire. And today, a terrorist just goes online and goes to the Al-Qaeda website, and what they've been suggesting that radical Islamists do inside America and other places across the West is to just go ahead and plan and implement their own terrorist act in the community they're living in. Just take on whatever opportunity presents itself, like blowing up a mall, or poisoning a water system, or like exploding a device at a public event like the Boston Marathon. This is already in the works. And for people like our caller that think that the terrorists don't understand that the CIA and the NSA are actually monitoring all calls, I mean, the terrorists know that. They've already scaled back. They've already changed their protocols as far as their communication. They're not using the internet. I mean, if they are, they're taking a chance, and I think they understand that. And they're most likely not sending it in the mail or over the phone lines. They understand that the NSA is looking for keywords from calls that generate from key sites. And these people aren't that dumb. So I'm not all convinced that America lost a lot of its secrets. I really don't think that's necessarily the case with Edward Snowden or any of these people that come up with this secret so-called valuable information. And I might be wrong on this, but I have a pretty good idea that most people who are operating in a nefarious manner are wise enough not to be discovered. Okay, this is a story that kind of scares me a little bit. I mean, it doesn't scare me, but it does kind of worry me. And this story comes from Creeping Sharia, and you would think we would already know this. And it's about our Secretary of State, John Kerry. But this article reveals on March 30th, 2013, Secretary of State John Kerry reveals daughter married to Iranian American with extensive ties to Iran. Now that might be a good thing, all right? I don't know, but it's suspect. And something that obviously wasn't reported on in the mainstream media, or we'd already know about it. And this story comes from a guy that we actually had on the show a couple weeks ago, Walid Shobat, who was actually a member of the Muslim Brotherhood and has since changed his allegiance, and he's doing a lot of really good writing about the Muslim Brotherhood and how they operate and where. It says here we have an example that demonstrates this reality further, and it comes via the Kenneth Timberman, who was picked up from on the fact that the new Secretary of State, John Kerry, has a son-in-law with a family still living in Iran. This reality could conceivably affect how Kerry deals with the Iranians. This is from the Daily Caller. It says in a greeting to the Iranian people on the occasion of the traditional New Year, it's called Nowruz holiday last week, Secretary of State John Kerry exposed a secret that journalists and academics have been agonizing over for the past 6 weeks. The fact that his daughter was married to an Iranian American who has extensive family ties in Iran. And Kerry goes on to say, I am proud of the Iranian Americans in my own family and grateful for how they have enriched my life. Kerry said in the official statement, Kerry also said he was strongly committed to resolving the differences between the United States and the Islamic Republic of Iran, to the mutual benefit of both of our people. Politicians like to keep their families off limit to the press, a decorum enforced vigorously when it comes to politicians who are in favor with the national media, but ruthlessly disregarded for others. But in Kerry's case, there could be larger ramifications. Since its inception, the FBI has vetted U.S. government officials involved in national security issues. And we've all heard the stories that if you're going for security clearance, that the FBI and other agencies will go around and talk to all of your neighbors, past, present, and almost future. They'll go to your school. They'll talk to people where you worked, and they really look into a person's background before they give them a security clearance. And they, of course, do that for government officials or people wanting to be government officials. And they generally won't grant clearances to individuals who are married to nationals of an enemy nation or have family members living in that country for fear of divided loyalties, or more simply, blackmail. There it is. Certainly, even leftists can comprehend this concept without inserting race into their thought processes. Oh, wait. Imagine a scenario in which a representative of Iran's mullahs approaches the State Department with a list of demands that, if not met, could have serious consequences for Kerry's in-laws living in Iran. In the current political construct, such demands could conceivably involve the U.S. withholding money, weapons, and aid earmarked for a country like Egypt as tensions in the Middle East escalate. While that may not sound like a bad idea to those of us who understand the threat of the Muslim Brotherhood, shouldn't our Secretary of State's sole interest be in lockstep with the interest of the United States? And obviously, this article calls into question the vulnerability that the Secretary of State has by having family members in Iran. And the most important job that John Kerry has is preventing Iran from getting nuclear weapons. It's a hell of a coincidence, and it's kind of alarming, at least in my mind. All right, this is a pretty good story. Actually got two stories from Australia that I want to do. This story here is pretty good. It is from gunsinfreedom.com, but the story is 17 years after Australia bans guns, police say gun crime is out of control. Actually, I read this article. The first part of it tells you everything you need to know, but the basic deal is, back 17 years ago, Australia, they banned guns. 17 years ago, Australia banned guns. And now the Australian police say that the crime is out of control. And the reason the crime is out of control is that the law-abiding abiding people in Australia turned in their guns, but the bad people didn't. And it's sheer fallacy to think if you were to pass a law outlawing guns, that bad people, criminals, would not, that they would not obey the law. They would keep possession of their arms. And it's sheer folly to suggest otherwise. It says in 1996, Australia unloaded some of the most severe gun bans and gun confiscation programs on record. And for the guns that were not confiscated, gun owners were forced to enter into licensed agreements and have their guns registered so the government knew what guns everyone had. Well, they really only knew what guns the law-abiding had, since none of the criminals actually followed the program. Fancy that. And Breitbart just reported some interesting developments in Australia that prove all the anti-gun lawmakers wrong. Gun control does not take guns out of the hands of the criminals. It only disarms the law-abiding while making everyone else less safe. Because of the out-of-control crime, Australia's law enforcement officials have been forced to carry out recent operations. The New South Wales Police Commissioner Andrew Spicklone had this to say about the spike in gun crime. He says, "There is no single source of gun violence. Guns have fallen into the hands of organized crime, outlaw motorcycle gangs, mid-level crime groups, and petty thieves. And the lines are often blurred." And it says that in Australia, in the last 12 months alone, over 3,300 people were charged with gun crimes, and over 9,000 guns have been confiscated. A military expert says that you should be hoarding these 30... Oh, no, that's something else. So at any rate, just another example of how gun control doesn't work. And then I have this other story from Australia. I hope I can find this, because we're kind of running out of time. We only have about 17 more minutes. Oh, right here. All right. Another story from Australia. And this is kind of shocking, and you can bet that the mainstream media is not going to take on this story. They're not going to report on this. But I think this is a big wow. And it says Australia says no. This will be the second time Julia Gillard has done this. She sure isn't backing down on her hardline stance, and one has to appreciate her belief in the rights of her native countrymen. A breath of fresh air to see someone lead with guts and determination. Australian Prime Minister does it again. The whole world needs a leader like this. Prime Minister Julia Gillard, Australia, says Muslims who want to live under Sharia law were told on Wednesday to get out of Australia. I'll repeat that. This is from the Prime Minister, Julia Gillard. Muslims who want to live under Islamic Sharia law were told on Wednesday to get out of Australia as the government targeted radicals in a bid to head off potential terrorist attacks. Separately, Gillard angered some Australian Muslims on Wednesday by saying she supported spy agencies monitoring the nation's mosques. Quote, "Immigrants, not Australians, must adapt. Take it or leave it. I am tired of this nation worrying about whether we have offended some individual or their culture. Since the terrorist attack on Bali, we have experienced a surge in patriotism by the majority of Australians. Quote, this culture has been developed over 2 centuries of struggles, trials, victories by millions of men and women who have sought freedom. We speak mainly English, not Spanish, Lebanese, Arabic, Chinese, Japanese, Russian, or any other language. Therefore, if you wish to become part of our society, learn the language." That's pretty strong words. I'd love to hear our president say that. Most Australians believe in God. This is not some Christian right-wing political push, but a fact because Christian men and women on Christian principles founded this nation, and this is clearly documented. It is certainly appropriate to display it on the walls of our schools. If God offends you, then I suggest you consider another part of the world as your new home, because God is part of our culture. And this is the Prime Minister talking here. She goes on to say, we will accept your beliefs and will not question why. All we ask is that you accept ours and live in harmony and peaceful enjoyment with us. This is our country, our land, and our lifestyle. And we will allow you every opportunity to enjoy all this. But once you are done complaining, whining, griping about our flag, our pledge, our Christian beliefs, our way of life, I highly encourage you to take advantage of one other great Australian freedom, the right to leave, in all capital letters. I love this stuff. Goes on to say, if you aren't happy here, then leave. We didn't force you to come here. You asked to be here. So accept the country that accepted you. Note, if we circulate this amongst ourselves in Canada and the US, we will find the courage to start speaking and voicing the same truths. And I'm just amazed this woman took that stance. And you can bet your bottom dollar now that some Islamists, probably several, are plotting a way to kill this woman for speaking up against radical Islam. Oh, another Mandela funeral story. Supposedly, this is from Kane TV. And I saw this story. It was kind of funny. And the claim is that while President Obama spoke, there was one of these sign language guys off to our left. And this story claims that the person doing the sign language wasn't really doing or performing sign language or trying to communicate in sign language, that basically the person was there just moving their hands to make it look like they had a sign language interpreter on the stage to make them look more politically correct, I guess. I don't know. May not be true. Okay, here. How much time we got? 10 minutes. Oh, did you hear that Pope Francis was named Time's 2013 Person of the Year? Yep, that's the big news right now. Time magazine made Pope Francis their 2013 Person of the Year. Big deal. I'm so down on the Catholic Church, I'm not even going to start. That's not that great of. Oh, this story this story here comes from the Gateway Pundits. Oh, so here we got another story. I was talking about how I haven't seen much from them. Again, this article is authored by Jim Huff. Released it yesterday. And millions of dollars in farm subsidies were given to city dwellers, including over $100,000 to the Lewis Faircom in Hyde Park. Oh, this is another story. For some reason, so and also this story, you got this will get you going. It says millions of dollars of farm subsidies, supposed to go to farmers, were given to city dwellers, including over $100,000 to Lewis Faircom in Hyde Park. And Lewis Faircom is a radical Muslim, and he's black. Open the Books just completed and released a new report called the Federal Transfer Report, Farm Subsidies, and the Big Dogs. Within the report, the group discovered this. Case study example, 3-year economic savings program, sounds like a legitimate program, Inc., from Hyde Park, a non-profit organization called 3-year Economic Savings Program, Inc. received 19 payments totaling $100,528 from 2008 to 2011. The address matches Louis Farrakhan's home and mosque address. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, shows the organization is located at the residence of the Nation of Islam leader, Minister Farrakhan, as the top recipient of farm subsidies in Hyde Park neighborhood. It ranked 12th among all of Chicago's recipients, and the Illinois Secretary of State website has the entity's status as not good standing. Click here if you want to find out more information. And this is Department of Agriculture, and it shows. It says here the mosque was repurchased and rededicated by Minister Louis Farrakhan in 1988 through efforts and sacrifices of the Nation of Islam and supporters worldwide. It was named Miriam after the mother of Jesus, Miriam Mary. This is to identify it as a holy place from which men and women come forth reborn. But on this story here, it actually shows like pins of various places in the Chicago suburbs that actually got this money from the agriculture department, and these people live in Chicago, and there's probably like 500 pins of individuals that got farm subsidies in the city of Chicago between 2008 and 2011. I mean, there's hundreds of them. And you've got to wonder, well, if one of them happened to go to Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam, I thought they were going to tell us some more names here. Maybe I don't see where that is. Here's a YouTube thing. Maybe that's just more and more about Louis Farrakhan. We don't have time to get into his program. All right, let's see. Moving on. The Pope. Oh, 4 things you didn't know about the Ryan budget. In case you haven't been following, remember the last government shutdown. The agreement they came to stated that the House and the Senate Budget Committee chairman would get together and put together a budget, since we haven't had a budget in this country for the last 5 years. And it looks like there is an agreement that's worked out between Representative Paul Ryan, Republican from Wisconsin, and Senator Patty Murray, Democrat from Wisconsin, or Washington, excuse me, Washington State. And I don't know, I read through the agreement, and it basically is a 2-year extension on the sequester cuts. And there's an additional $45 billion that was put into discretionary spending over the next 2 years. And I'm trying to think whatever other major provisions. Nothing really. All they really could deal with was discretionary spending. They can't do anything about entitlements, because those numbers are pretty much just frozen in statute. So at any rate, whatever this agreement is right now that they're talking about is not going to be the agreement that the president has before him and he signs. I mean, there's going to be a lot of turns and bends and ups and downs with this piece of legislation, and I imagine there's going to be a lot of pork inserted into it. So, I don't really see this agreement as much more than a stopping off point in the journey that this piece of legislation is going to have to travel before it comes law. So we'll keep an eye on it. We may be talking about another government shutdown, but the pundits are saying that neither party has much of a stomach for another shutdown. That the last so-called 18% of the government actually shut down, that was called the shutdown. That caused a lot of consternation and pain for both parties. So they don't want to have to go through that. Oh, my friend Fred Bowder of Crestone, he said something the other day that I thought was rather profound. He said that Nelson Mandela is the linen of South Africa. Fred Bowder, Crestone, Colorado. Nelson Mandela is the linen of South Africa. What do we got? 4 minutes. Let's see. Obamacare. What is this? Obamacare exchange limits. I can't remember what this was about. Just when you thought there would be no more big surprises, this happens. I can't remember what that's about. We've talked a little bit about this, that the number of casualties and injuries in Afghanistan have risen dramatically under President Obama, and part of the reason for that is that the Obama administration has continually cut back the call to fire order by our soldiers on the ground in Afghanistan. In other words, the administration keeps putting more restrictions on our soldiers in terms of when they can return fire and engage the enemy. And most recently, the administration of Obama said that the soldiers can't fire into a house, even if a terrorist is using the house as cover. But it says here, this story is from GOP, the Daily Dose, says 64% of U.S.-Afghan war deaths since Peace Prize president inaugurated. 74% of the deaths in Afghanistan were under the Obama administration. And almost 3/4 of the 2,153 U.S. military fatalities in the 12-year-old Afghanistan war have taken place during the Obama administration. All right, hey, look, Bailey, my dog wants to get out. She's been really good here the last couple hours, and so I can see that we're almost out of time, and I got to bid you adieu. We'll see you on Friday for Loco Friday. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have any kind of day you want.